Piss on Pity was the rallying call for our movement over the last 30 years to basically say that pity is an actually derogatory word for disabled people. We don't see ourselves as pitying. We see ourselves as warriors, as fighters, resistors. And if you look back over our history, and Judy will talk about the book No Limits and the radical history of the disability movement, it will show you our history of the last 30 years and how the austerity agenda of the last 10 years has eroded literally over 30 years of disabled people's rights. Now, we've got some great speakers today, but I'm sure some of you may have heard. Sorry, and if you're offended by the T-shirt, I am sorry, but this is now our message to Boris Johnson. And basically, you may have heard this morning that the Supreme Court ruled that Boris Johnson's decision to prorogue Parliament is unlawful. So it's a message from DPAC to Boris Johnson: get your ass back to Parliament and face the questions you should be facing. Right, now we're going to, just a few housekeeping rules. Is there anyone here, because there will be live streaming going on and people taking some pictures and what have you, so if you're not comfortable about being filmed or you know, during the discussion afterwards or anything, please let us know, and you know, we make sure that you're not on film or in the photos. Obviously the exit is behind us, and the double doors if you need to get out, and the toilets are around the corner. There's water up here if anyone needs it. It shouldn't be just for me and the speakers. So let's get on with what we're here to do. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker who is here, and I need to apologise on behalf of Ellen Clifford, who's on the steering group of Disabled People Against Cuts with me. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here today. So our speakers are going to be Judy Hunt, who, husband Paul, was one of the pioneers of the disability movement, who wrote a letter to The Guardian and began a union, the Union of Physical Impairment and everything, so we're going to talk about that. But first of all, my bad. My name's Paula Peters, and I'm on the National Steering Group of Disabled People Against Cuts and chair of Bromley and Croydon Unite Community. So I'm going to be chairing the session with you today, and we're going to have 3 guest speakers, and then we're going to go into split into little working groups. What we're going to be talking about is how we can have disabled people at its heart of campaigning around social security, social care, the NHS, and keep building the resistance against the Tories. So I'd like to ask you all to give a big welcome to Judy Hunt, who's sitting on my left, looking a little nervous here, and she's got 10 minutes to speak about the book and her husband Paul would like to learn more. Over to you, Judy.
Well, thank you very much. Okay.
Hello. I think you have to point straight at you.
Okay, right. Okay, we're away. Well, first of all, thank you very, very much for inviting me here today. I'm very, very honoured to be here. Yes, I'll talk about the book No Limits at the end of what I have to say, because in a way what I'm going to talk about is the reason why that book was written. I've been specifically asked to talk about the organisation Union of the Physically Impaired Against Segregation, known as UPIS for short, because it's such a long title. UPIS was founded in 1972, and this was a profoundly important development in the UK and beyond it. First of all, I'd like to just put it into a social context. Go back to 1970, just had the Chronically Sick and Disabled Persons Act passed. Social Services Act has just come into being. The very, very few services on the ground for disabled people. A lot of segregation. People were in segregated institutions, in hospitals, because there was no housing and there was no support in the community. They're also in segregated education to a large extent. Lives, and also, I mean, segregated workshops, special transport, special day centres, etc., etc. Their lives were very dominated by medicine. Doctors had an awful lot of authority and say as to where people could live, where people went to school, whether they could have training, could do jobs, and so on. Disabled people were very unrepresented at that stage and very disregarded. Their views were, where people did organise, they weren't being listened to, they weren't being treated with seriousness. In the 60s, and towards, particularly in the middle 60s, towards the end of the 60s, there had been growing a groundswell of discontent about this. One of the reasons why the DPAC Act happened, because of this discontent about the lack of services and the lack of support and lack of representation. That groundswell was all about poverty, about lack of mobility, and about the inaccessible environment. A very large organisation called the Disablement Income Group drew a lot of those people together, and it was significant. There was also mobility organisations like the Disabled Drivers Association. There was also another one called the ADP, Association of Disabled Professionals, which didn't last very long, but it did try and tackle some things around employment and education, as did the National Federation for the Blind, which took up the struggle against segregated education. But the issue then was that these organisations seemed to be single issue, many groups, many charities, small charities and large charities, competing for funding. Amidst all this, there was a chap called Paul Hunt. He'd been living in institutions for a large chunk of his life, and he'd spent many years by this time leading a struggle of residents for self-determination and to have representation on the management of their own institution, their own home. He, like others, wanted them to see them have much greater control of their lives. Now, in 1970, he and I got married, and we moved to London, and we got involved in campaigns such as DIG. And it was really around then Paul was recognising that a lot of the problems they'd been facing in the institutions, about control of their life, lack of respect, lack of representation, was just as true in the community. So there were many parallels. And the other problem was that these organisations weren't tackling the plight of people in institutions at all, really. It was a sort of a hidden area. So in 1972, he wrote a letter to The Guardian and other disability journals asking for people to join him to form a consumer group of disabled people to examine the causes of disability and to find a way forward. And this became UPIS. They had internal discussions in circulars because they were scattered around the country and couldn't easily meet. These discussions were conducted in confidence because people were vulnerable, because the things they were saying in these discussions were very controversial at that time. And the people were vulnerable to prying eyes. The union produced an aim and policy statement over a period of 18 months. A sort of detailed policy statement. Sorry, I'm going to turn over. The fundamental aim it had was to see all segregated facilities replaced by the means for disabled people to live in the mainstream of life with full control of their lives. It was very important also that disabled people became active on their own behalf, led their own struggles for change, took control of their own organisations, and didn't pursue issues in isolation, because all these campaigns, all the things that they were up against, were interconnected. They were a small group, but they were very feisty, and the large charities, established charities, which excluded disabled people from their management and their, deciding what they were about, the local authorities and the housing authorities found the UPS very hard to ignore. It became quite considerably feared, especially when they campaigned vigorously against the building of new institutions. The authorities suddenly felt a bit hesitant with going ahead with their plans when there was these vociferous disabled people saying they were wrong. And they also, in the campaigned for the resources to be sent instead and redirected into the community for accessible housing and community support services, were responded to with considerable excitement by disabled people. However, UPS, because it was quite controversial, it also drew hostility from amongst disabled people and their able-bodied supporters, stroke managers in the local associations. People objected to the secrecy and closed discussions, which were conducted for very good reason. And people objected to its uncompromising stance on segregation. For UPS, wanting to build a social movement, this was a problem. The dominant ideology was hard to shift, and it needed to attract new members, but it was having difficulty. However, from all this, the most fundamental appraisal of disability occurred. Disability, UPS said, was not caused by impairment. Disability was caused by the way society was organised. Barriers excluded people, segregation prevented participation, and choice and control was denied to them. Because the means now existed in society to remove the barriers, both technically, economically and socially, to not make the necessary adjustments to the society was to oppress disabled people. It was discrimination. To deny people the support they needed to take part in society as full and equal human citizens was to oppress them, just as it is with other social groups who are discriminated against and denied opportunities to achieve their full potential. This interpretation of the social model, this interpretation has become known as the social model of disability, which many of you will have heard about. Right, I'll move on faster. So this is a very emancipatory concept. It became the lifeblood of the social movement, which did grow. And this was made up of many threads, which UPS helped to draw together in 1981. This large movement spearheaded struggles for civil rights, ADL, inclusive education, the independent living movement, employment rights, public transport, access, culture, etc., disability studies in universities, and for disabled people controlling their own organisations and services. It also influenced things abroad when it actually took the social model of disability to the founding conference of the Disabled People's International. So this was a truly remarkable achievement by a small, dedicated group of people, which spread ripples through society. And although UPS was disbanded in 1990, its legacy lives on and is even more important now as we fight against the austerity measures of this right-wing government. Okay. This year I published a book about the history called No Limits. I have got some flyers here which tells you how to access it. You can either purchase one from me, but also you can download it for free. There is also another flyer, just to let you know that a new archive has been created in Manchester, in the library there, where attached to the library, which is bringing back together all sorts of radical movements, including disability. And the UPS documents are there protected, because there are certain confidential rules about access to them, but they're for serious researchers. And the third one is called, it's a document which came out of the UPS papers, early discussions, which is like a polemic between Vic Finkelstein and other members. And again, there's a leaflet where you can download that from.
Now, I actually finished reading Judy's book on the train coming down here, and it's really worth getting hold of a copy of the book or downloading from the Greater Manchester Disabled Coalition's website, a downloadable copy, having a read of the book, because it gives a really detailed and thorough understanding of the formalisation of disabled people's movement, the struggles that people were involved in, and how the fight can, the fight today. So do actually look up Judy's book, and she's going to stay around for a while. So if people have got a few questions at the end of our session, please come up and ask some questions. And thank you so much, Judy, for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. Thank you so much. I'm not sure if Marsha D. Cordova, the Shadow Minister for Disabled People, will be able to join us or not. If she is, she's going to be late to session, because obviously Jeremy has asked MPs to kind of get ready to head back to Westminster. So we have a now second speaker, which is going to be on video link, will be Frances Ryan. Many of you may have heard of Frances Ryan, the Guardian journalist, who's written numerous articles about austerity and how it impacts on disabled people. And just recently, DPAC supported Frances Ryan's book launch of her book, Crippled, Austerity and the Demonisation of Disabled People, which is available for many bookshops. We were supposed to have a stall here today with copies. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do that. Frances has provided her speech via video link, so if we're ready to go on the video and hear what Frances has to say.
Britain has made us a promise that in times of sickness and disability, the welfare state will be there to protect us. Over the last decade, tens of billions of pounds have been removed from support for disabled people, from policies like the bedroom tax, cuts in disability benefits, to a now threadbare social care system. Disabled people have been hit, on average, 9 times harder by cuts than the average citizen. If you're severely disabled, that goes up to being hit 19 times as hard as other people. One person I spoke to was Rachel. Rachel is in her early 40s. She uses a wheelchair and has multiple health problems, but the social care system has always enabled her to live independently, so doing the basics of life like getting dressed, going out to see friends. But in recent years, social care cuts mean her care package has been cut and cut and cut. So she first lost the person that would come in and clean the house, then she lost the care assistant that came in and helped her get dressed in the morning. She lost the person that came in the evening to help her get washed and into bed. And in the end, Rachel ended up with having all of her social care removed, so she now has none at all. On her bad days, she can't get herself undressed, she can't wash herself, and she can't cook for herself either. So she lives off fruit and bread. Her doctors tell her that she's now clinically malnourished. On her really bad days, she has to sleep in her clothes in her wheelchair. Rachel isn't alone. She is one of hundreds of thousands of people in this country who have disabilities and who are now expected to live in conditions that we wouldn't wish on an animal. In one of the richest nations on earth, we should be able to make sure that all citizens, including disabled people, can live in safety and dignity and have flourishing lives.
Hi everyone, so sorry I can't be there in person. If I need to be near the beach for a couple of days. But I hope you're having a great conference, and with that I can speak for a few minutes about this topic. I think that these ideas that you're discussing today are actually some of the most fundamental ones that we can address as a disability rights movement. I know that when I wrote my book, Crippled, yes, it's absolutely partly about documenting the impact of austerity on disabled people, but just as much in my mind, I was trying to help challenge the myths and the prejudices that helped us get to that point. I think as the left, we talk quite open about the fact that one of the most damaging myths around poverty has always been that it is somehow inevitable. In this idea that while some people enjoy a life of fortune, there will somehow always be others who can't afford food. But I think we need to talk about the fact that this is just as strong when it comes to disability. I think that the notion of inevitability for inequality is really central in maintaining the status quo. And briefly today, I just want to talk about the three ways that I think this happens when it comes to disability. So firstly, for me, it's about the openly negative way that some people describe disabled people, most predominantly in recent years, how we've seen people talk about disabled benefit payments, for example, as liars or fakers or drained on the taxpayer. And we know, this isn't marginalised language, this isn't fringe stuff. This sort of language when it comes to disabled people goes to the front pages of national newspapers. It's implied in speeches made by cabinet ministers. I think that's had a huge impact on how the public have increasingly perceived disabled people, against this backdrop of squeezed wages and growing anti-welfare culture. Britain, I think, in the book I talk about how it's the emergence of the undeserving sick, where not only is social and economic disadvantage seen as a sign of personal failure, but also being disabled or ill. And I think that's enables a situation where people are blamed for their disability, people are blamed for their illness, people are blamed for needing the state to help them stay afloat, and it legitimises a belief that people's support is a cost that the state shouldn't have to pay. I think here we see how toxic myths around class and disability could combine in a way that really uniquely scapegoats disabled working class individuals. I think the second example is the way that disabled people are often viewed as sort of needy and passive and kind of tragic figures. And sometimes this is meant in quite sort of well-meaning ways, but of course is really damaging in its own right. So in the book I talk to this guy called Pete, who's 30 and uses a wheelchair, and he talks to me about how he has had his social care cuts in recent years. He was having, round-the-clock care. his own flat, and when it was cut repeatedly, he could no longer safely live in his own home, and meant that the local authority essentially shoved him into a care home for the elderly. So there he was at age 30, having to sell his own flat and move into an institution with people who could be his grandparents. And I remember thinking, I cannot imagine a situation where this would happen to a non-disabled person and where it would be seen as normal. But there is something about the perception of disabled people that where we shrug our shoulders and we think, here's a 30-year-old that's stuck in this home for life, and this is somehow a normal, acceptable, slightly sad, but otherwise absolutely okay thing for the state to do to somebody. Because we perceive disabled people still in ways that are so far removed from how we see other autonomous adults who we think should have independent lives of full quality, but somehow, because people are disabled, those things, those qualities, those beliefs, those hopes can go out the window. And I think that, thirdly, where language inadvertently reinforces the idea that disabled people's inequality is somehow inevitable. We've seen in recent years the way that disabled people are routinely described as the most vulnerable. And we hear this a lot when it comes to sort of newspapers, but also hear it in speeches made by people on the left who tell us in a really well-meaning way that even in times of austerity, a decent society, for example, will always protect the most vulnerable. But I think for many of us in the disabled community and on the left, it's incredibly important to talk about the fact that disabled people, don't need to be vulnerable. Contrary to these myths around disability, it's not inevitable for people with disabilities to be afraid or desperate or isolated. Vulnerability isn't inherent to illness or disability. Vulnerability comes when politicians choose to pull the support disabled people need in order to live dignified, fulfilling, independent lives. I think this seems kind of grim in many ways, because it means, when you realise or talk about the fact that none of this was inevitable, that it was a choice, it means confronting the fact that as a society we are consistently creating and voting for policies that are willingly, actively harming disabled people. But I think actually, perversely, there's actually huge hope in this as well, because when poverty, discrimination, marginalisation are essentially man-made, it means that human beings are the ones that can fight it. When such hardship is the result of political choices, it means that we can choose to do something better. It means that all of this is up for grabs. And I think that with that in mind, that enables us to argue for radical structural change. It enables us, it empowers us to be able to say that actually the moral but also common sense solution is to invest in the structures that help disabled people live full lives. It enables us to point to the social care system, to the housing, to the social safety net, to the NHS, to mental health services, and point to the fact that all of this is based on what we choose to do with it and how we can make it the most valuable structure it can be to create a society that is fairer but also something better for all of us. I think that as Britons, welfare state undergoes, you know, I think what is its closest standards yet? I don't think there's ever been a more crucial moment to make that case, to strengthen the social safety net, to demand more from our leaders than more and more cuts, and to fundamentally reject the myth that this is the best that we can do as a society. In my book, I hoped it would be a record of these times, but when we talk about this as we are today, it's also about a rallying cry for change. Because I think that right now, when we look at what this country is going through, it is really easy to feel overwhelmed, to feel fatigued by politics, or just to feel hopeless. But I think that now is ultimately the time when we need to grab that hope more than ever. And I think that the biggest sign of hope there is to stick with this argument that none of what we are seeing is inevitable. It is entirely within our collective power to change it, and we can do that as a movement together. Thanks so much.
Okay. Right, Ellen obviously can't be here today.
Yes.
So she's, I hate these microphones.
So she can't be here today, but she's emailed her speech to us to read out to you. So this is in Ellen's words, and I just want to say that even, you know, all of us at DPAC, you know, day in, day out, there's so much work goes behind the scenes to our actions, to the research, to the online campaigns, that all of us are battling horrendous health issues and everything, and even we sometimes have days where we literally just need to take care of ourselves. And I think one of the most important things in the fight against depression is self-care. Is so important so that we can continue the fight, and it's so important that we also must remember we've lost so many of our brothers and sisters in the last 10 years in this brutal austerity agenda, and that we remember each and every one of them. But this is what Ellen has to say in her own words. Disability is an issue that powerfully exposes the true nature of capitalism as a cruel system based on exploitation and greed. It therefore isn't surprising that the dominant ideas in society around disability are full of misconceptions and act to conceal an understanding of the true relationship between disability and capitalism. Disability is a historical concept that did not exist in the way we understand today before the Industrial Revolution and the social and economic changes that brought. There were always people with impairments, but the way labour was organised meant that people with impairments were not thought of as belonging to a separate identifiable category. The category of disability came about as a socially created way of identifying and separating out those who are less productive within the conditions of the workplace. And it is to be noted as those conditions change depending on industrial changes and intensification of labour, which people are more or less productive also changes. For example, research indicates that disabled people were more likely to be in employment in the 1970s than today, and found it easier to be in jobs in manual industry than the service sector. Disability is a historical, socially created category, and yet the way it is commonly understood is an individual problem. You still often hear people talk about disability in the terms of what is wrong with a person. The development of the social model of disability was groundbreaking because without denying pain or distress, the part of lived experience of certain impairments, it provides a tool for explaining that far from being an individual problem, disability is a form of oppression. If we want to end the oppression and ill treatment of disabled people, we don't need to cure people with impairments. We need to fundamentally change the way society is organised. At the early 20th century, the socialist Helen Keller wrote, "Many young women full of devotion and goodwill have been engaged in superficial charities. They have tried to feed the hungry without knowing the causes of poverty. They have tried to minister to the sick without understanding the cause of disease. They have tried to raise up fallen ministers without understanding the brutal arm of necessity that struck them down. We attempt social reforms when we need social transformation. Disability politics are inherently radical in challenging the system we live under. It therefore can be frustrating for disabled campaigners when the issue of disabled people's oppression remains poorly understood within the wide left among people who are supposedly committed to social transformation. During my research over the past couple of months, I've come across complaint after complaint from disabled campaigners and academics about the lack of interest in disability theory beyond people with personal experience of it. The historian Douglas Blayton writes, for example, "Disability is everywhere in history, once you begin looking for it, but conspicuously absent in the histories we write." While I share this frustration, I also think we need to understand that a true understanding of the nature of disabled people's oppression is deliberately obscured from view, so that what's really interesting about it is hidden. Instead of understanding disability as a deliberate exclusion of people who can't starve the interests of profit, the dominant idea of disability in society is that it's somehow inevitable that people with impairments will experience disadvantage. Helen Keller is herself a strong example of how popular ideas concerning disability present it as an individual problem. Most people who have never heard of her know she was born deaf and blind. They may well have been taught as I was at school that she was bravely overcome her impairment with the help of a wonderful teacher to be able to communicate with the outside world. What is less well known is that she was a fervent socialist who campaigned against the First World War and rallied against US immigration laws that barred entry to disabled people, whereby preventing disabled Germans and Austrians fleeing there to escape mass murder by the Nazis. The exception of her exceptional political activism got from the right-wing media of her day the very similar to what Greta Thunberg is now experiencing, where her views were attributed to the simplifications of her mind arising from her impairment. These aren't aspects of Helen Keller's life that many people know, because the version of her life that has been popularised is not one where she rebelled against the system, but one where she overcome the adversity of her deaf-blindness in order to better conform. Her passion for collective resistance is taken out of the story, and we are left with a familiar account of her triumph over tragedy. Whether it is presented as triumph or tragedy, the popular story of disability is an individual rather than the collective one. It is personal, not political. The oppression of disabled people is a strong and malignant force affecting millions of people. Disabled people are the world's largest minority group, and it is worth taking the time to understand so we can be more effectively resistant and fight to build a radically different society where everyone is valued for who they are. In my experience of campaigning with DPAC, one of the most effective ways of changing people's views about disability has been when we have engaged in active struggle alongside non-disabled people who come to see disabled campaigners, not as defined by our impairments, but as fighters who resist against the passive role society tries to foist upon us, and who are less easily fooled by the system as a consequence of the brutality of our experiences of oppression. Helen, we miss you here today, and everyone at DPAC absolutely loves you, and we hope we all catch up with you soon. And last but by no means least, we have Marsha D. Cordova in the building, the Shadow Minister for Disabled People. In our Trust the Tourist campaign in 2017, street stalls right across London, I think we had a part to play in Marsha becoming an MP.
playing a huge
Marsha,
part.
thank you so much for coming here today, and over to you.
Okay, well, thank you. It's really good to be here. Thank you, Paula. She hasn't given me a hug. No, I'm really, really happy to be here. And can I just send my huge love and hugs to Ellen Clifford as well. I look forward to hanging out with you again really soon. And I've just come. Oh, hiya, Roger.
All right, we'll pass that on.
Please do. Apologies, I'm late. I was just at speaking at another Fringe meeting on ending the hostile environment, talking about obviously what this awful government has done in terms of disabled people, and you know, listening to people's experiences, you never kind of tire of the experiences of what people are actually going through, and just that conscious cruelty that they have done to so many of us. So, you know, today, piss on pity, I mean, disability oppression is, you know, we do need to talk about this, because I wasn't going to share this, but I think I might just do away with the speech and just kind of really talk about my experience recently, and because it is an element of disability oppression, and you know, until society and the institutions are going to understand disability, we will not make any progress. We've had decades of campaigning, and I say this always, that you know, I'm standing on the shoulders of many disability activists and supporters that have went before me in campaigning to ensure we had some rights and protections, to ensure we had an element of independent living that has now been taken away practically, to ensure that there was some legislation, although, you know, the legislation for disabled people in the form of what was the Disability Discrimination Act, it didn't have the same parity as the Race Relations Act. And that, you know, why was that? Why was it not a crime to discriminate against a disabled person? But it is, if you're black or brown. You know, and that to me is just the embodiment of oppression. But I talk about it in the context of being an elected MP, and so many activists like Paula and others, Roger, so many people came and really helped me fight to win that seat, and we overturned a Tory majority of 8,000 and elected me. I never tire of that, and I never forget that, and I remember that each and every time I'm in that building. But this year has been a challenge, because as a disabled MP I should have the right support. Reasonable adjustments need to be made, and the organisation, the independent body that supports all MPs, so all 650 of us, made some decisions where they refused to support me with the extra costs that I have in terms of printing. It may sound small, but you know, I have to print things in really large font, which means I use a lot more paper and a lot more ink than my non-disabled colleagues. And they just wouldn't accept that. Well, actually, they actually did say, yeah, we know you might have extra costs, but we're not going to meet those costs. That blatant discrimination. And they thought that it was okay to treat somebody like that. And you have to then fight them, quite literally, you know, really have a to and fro with them. And it wasn't until I stood in the chamber on International Women's Day this year and raised that issue that they finally decided to have a chat with me and wanting to look at solutions. Should it have taken that? No, of course it shouldn't have. I was appointed the Shadow Minister for Disabled People back in 2017. And I was really, you know, Jeremy's asked me to serve, and I wanted to do that, and so I accepted it. But I knew that to do that role and give that role the time, the investment, and the work that it required, I would need extra support to do the job. So I asked the IPSA to whether they would support me with an additional staff member to do this job. And they asked for some sort of proof or evidence, and so a letter was provided to them by the Parliamentary Occupational Health Service that stated that due to my disability and my shadow ministerial responsibilities, I would require that extra support. So IPSA then approved that support, which was wonderful. I was able to recruit somebody to support me in the brief as the shadow minister. And as we know, because we have a very hostile government, holding them to account does require a lot of work and effort. You know, I've had so many points of orders and urgent questions against this government granted to me. So I was pleased to be holding them to account and keeping them on their toes. But then this year, IPSA decided that they made an error in providing that staffer, and they were taking it away. So I then had to lose that staff member. And for me, we talk about oppression, and that is oppression, because my job is to be an elected Member of Parliament for the people of Battersea, whom I serve with all my heart and soul and might, but I have an additional role and responsibility that require that additional support. Now, we're in the process of trying to work out some solutions, but I shouldn't have been oppressed and put through what they have put me through. They have caused me much worry, anxiety, stress, tears. My sighted assistant, Sarita, is here at the back there, and you know, she's witnessed most of it because she shares an office with me. But I say that, and I wasn't intending to share that, but I just think it's important to understand that, you know, we're in 2019, and disabled people still do not have the same equal parity as everybody else. And we have to fight, continue to fight, to ensure that the labour movement, the trade union movement, all come together with us as activists, with DPAC and others, to ensure that we can create that society that is fair, compassionate, just and equal. Because 10 years of austerity has led to what the UN have called a systematic violation of the rights of disabled people. The UN reporter in his 2019 report likened the Department for Work and Pensions to a 19th century workhouse. This is a stain on society, and we all know that disabled people have been hardest hit by much of austerity. And it's not just in social security, it's in the labour market, it is in housing, and probably worst of all, it's in social care. Now, I only say social care because that's what we all know it as, but really it should be independent living, because it's just about us being able to independently live and participate in society. So if we want to go out and campaign and do direct action, Paula, we should be able to do that. You know, we have a labour market now where the disability employment gap has remained at just over 30%. Why is that? We need to change those attitudes and people's mindsets. You know, Labour are committed to the social model of disability, and again, we pay tribute to those disabled people, their carers, their partners, their spouses, that fought to actually ensure that it's not us that are the problem, it's society, those barriers that disable us. Yes, we have an impairment, mine is nystagmus, so I have an involuntary movement of the eye which causes me to be severely visually impaired. But it's society. I can't just walk out of this building and walk up those steps on my own. I have to hold on to my assistant. I can't navigate this party conference on my own. It's society, and that's what we need to change. Now, I believe going forward under a Labour government led by Jeremy Corbyn, we can achieve much of this. It won't happen overnight, we all know this. But step by step, I believe we can actually create that transformative society that we so, as disabled people, we hunger, we desire, and absolutely need. Thank you.
Now we're going to split we're going to have one on the NHS and how that's part of my access needs. I struggle with technology. Right, we're going to have 4 workshops. One on the NHS and how to include disabled people. Now, I don't know, I live in Bromley, which is an outer borough of London. We found out 2 weeks ago that everybody in London are going to start to see their healthcare rationed. That if you have more than one consultant, you're not going to have more than one consultant, so you're going to be denied access to some of the healthcare to keep you going day to day. When I heard that, I didn't sleep for 4 days. That impacts on me. If I don't have access to one of my consultants, I won't be able to keep on functioning. I owe the NHS everything. We all owe the NHS everything, which is why it's so important we fight for a national health service and stop the rot of privatisation. How do we include disabled people in the fight for our NHS and in NHS campaigning? Because this is going to impact, and it is across the country. The second workshop is going to be on social care / independent living. How do we build the campaigns around independent living and the cuts against social care? Disabled people are being oppressed with losing their support and being imprisoned at home, often left with absolutely nothing. And I think that's the second workshop. The third one on social security. Disabled people are losing personal independence payments, losing their mobility cars, their powered wheelchairs. Mobility is reselling powered wheelchairs that disabled people are losing. When you can't have your mobility car or powered wheelchair, you're left imprisoned at home, unable to work, unable to get to appointments, unable to participate in society. Again, yes, oppressed. And our fourth workshop, if we've got enough people, is how do we build our movement and rise up and fight the Tories and build and continue the fight for our human rights, and also make sure the movement is inclusive so that the people online are able to participate. But with another twist, how do we fight back against the DWP who are putting fear in disabled people's heads and stopping them campaigning? And also, how do we fight back against the police who are literally giving information to the DWP when we're out there on the street and campaigning, which is a huge, huge issue, especially with Greater Manchester Police doing that when people are up in Manchester out there, and Lancashire when disabled protesters have been out on the fracking movement. So if you want to split into 4 groups, so the NHS in the far left corner, social care independent living in the far right corner, social security in the top left corner, and how to build our movement, make it inclusive, and continue the fight for human rights in the top right corner up here. And I'll have to give you about 20 minutes and then we'll have feedback from each of the 4 groups. Thank you for listening to all the great speakers we've had, and on behalf of DPAC, thanks for everyone coming today. So if you want to split into the groups, so NHS in the far left corner, social care independent living in the far right corner, social security up in the left corner, and how to build our movement in this corner. Roger and Andy, if you want to lead on one of the groups, I'd be really, really grateful.
But this corner here is the NHS.
No, top left.
Okay, let's put them going page left. So.
Well, this is on this side. Student movement, and all the way over in the far corner left.
Well, I'm here, I'm going to here.
Are we going to move the chairs?
No, I think you're fine. I think there's some around you.
I like that.
Still live.
slide your own.
Oh, sure.
So we've got a lot of 20 minutes. Can we just have a quick bit about
Yeah, well, I think everyone's just in 30 seconds.
You okay?
Thank you so much. So you're going to send out with the footage from this as well? You are, okay.
From Roger Lewis and I'm from DPAC.
Yeah, we might send it to me as well. Send it to me.
Yeah, sure. Send the money, yeah.
I'm Jack. I'm from
And the minute is that as well.
Okay, thank you everyone. Strong, Southern England strongly represented. But nonetheless, so building the movements. I mean, how in terms of the talk that we just heard, carrying on social movements of the past, the disability movement of the past that we heard about at the beginning, and at a time where we're not really moving forward, but we're trying to defend the advances we made in the past. How do we see that we can build and go on further? So anyone want to kick off with some ideas?
I'm Snarder from mainly Reading, but I'm with Berkshire Disabled People Against Cuts. And until we get, it's like any other movement, until we get political representation, with the movement, any movement, whatever it is not going to happen. We've made massive developments as the Labour Party with all women shortlists. No other marginalised group that I can think of has been so badly targeted as a result of austerity as much as disabled people. And if we had more parliamentary and political representation in local government as well as national, we're not going to have the policies in place to make sure that reasonable adjustments are a daily part of all our lives, regardless of your access needs, that they should be a consideration everywhere. So in the same way that we had all women shortlists, I think we need to have quotas on disabled people represented in Parliament and local government.
And that's a really brilliant idea. But there's another the thing about building a movement is getting disabled people behind it, building a movement. I think it's a slightly different thing to getting representation in government. I just think at the moment we're all incredibly isolated, and there's nowhere obvious to go in terms of disability action, and just dealing with some of the absurd problems we've got at the moment. And it's very hard to make that environment, and I suppose the question of breaking down.
So I think DPAC, like disabled people's groups, is phenomenal for doing that. But obviously, because disability, when you're a woman, it's very easy to kind of just define. But when disability incorporates such a wide spectrum of people, that again, that's why it's so isolating, because of the different impairments people have and the different kind of access needs.
So why it's so isolating?
That's one of the...
we are unsupported.
Yes.
And then we can't come like back.
Absolutely, and one of the things I would say is kind of whoever, if you're involved in your CLPs, I just think it should be a cornerstone of the Labour Party movement to support support rights for disabled people.
Yeah, there's a disability Labour. Is that represented here?
I'm in disability. I'm in disability.
Oh yeah, what is it? How is that?
We have a manifesto. We newly have a neurodiverse manifesto as well. There's a meeting about that neurodiversity group this evening. And we look to support our CLP officers and Labour Campaign Forum officers in bringing forward the disability issues and making the other party members aware of that. But I do feel like you do, that I'm afraid what you're saying is about a bit peripheral to the topic of this here, which is how we build and maintain a disabled people's movement so we can seek our rights. That's my understanding at least.
Anyone here from the trade union movement? Anyone got some experience of the trade union involved?
Sorry, just a quick interruption. Just on to about 5 hours to about 20 past 2 to have a discussion on the you have 10 minutes for a feed down.
Can you give us a shout? 3, 4 minutes to go.
Yeah.
So yeah, any experience of working in you've worked with CLP trade union involved with support?
I'm in United Community. I don't think I work with them a lot. I'm trying to, we're building a social care fight group in Unity, a regional social care action group, and Unite Community has been very supportive and helped us with things like printing, and they're just supportive. And they were also supportive when we did a demo on, we did a thing about the change of the guard.
The Keep Castle trains.
Yeah, and we'll do another one of those soon. But it would be time to do that, I think, but, you know, so that's what I'm saying, that Unite Community have been very, very supportive.
Yeah, no, and I know that was Methodist and DPAC, Universal Credit, been absolutely phenomenal. Keep Guards on Trains, a great opportunity to involve disabled people who are perhaps not active in disabled groups or disabled campaigns, because it's something that does affect everyone. And that can be a great way of bringing new people in, as well as linking with trade unions as well. Just to throw something in, because Marsha talked about it. Marsha's difficulties she's had in having not getting the reasonable adjustments to support you, because this is an issue in the labour movement in the trade union. Is that we don't get this access to work. If you're in work, you can get this. The government run by the DPAC, very successful scheme called access to work. But Marsha's because it's someone who works voluntarily, she doesn't get it. It's not on top. So it has to be paid for through Parliament itself, which previously, when Marsha was a councillor, she was a councillor in Lambeth, where I work, and she wasn't entitled to access to work. So it's up to the council to pay the reasonable adjustments, and that's a challenge, as we've heard from Marsha. So that's a barrier. And because there's a cost, there can be a cost, it's a reality. And that's a challenge for our organisation, it's one we need to meet. BSL interpreter, sorry.
You would think with the Act, if you get the Equalities Act it's got to be met.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, okay, you can't get access to work, that's ridiculous, but you can't. So somebody's breaking the law somewhere, not using a
union or
So how are we going to do this? Some people have got their hands up. So,
okay, yes, yeah, it doesn't work too
yeah,
well.
exactly.
Just if you call out, actually, just call your name.
David, yeah.
Yeah, David.
Yeah, union or trade union or any other organisation. One of the key things we need to do is get people, disabled or non-disabled, understanding the social model of disability. So I know in my CLP, one thing we have a problem with is we've just started Disability Forum, but one thing we've noticed is a lack of BAME people. So they don't want that, if you like, double whammy of being disabled. So they don't want to identify as disabled. And one way around that is getting people to understand what the social model means, that it is in fact a critique of capitalism. And as we get people understanding that and how it intersects with socialism indeed, then we will hopefully get wider solidarity. So that's something we can do. And also in terms of this conference, I think if we're going to have a 4-day conference, we should be having 1 day just for minorities and the afternoon should be for disabled people, so that we are getting non-disabled people to these events.
Yeah.
You kind of led into what I was going to say. It's about defining the movement and then
you know, personally, but also finding tangible ways to engage with people and not something abstract. So I think that idea about reviving the social model kind of awareness in some form is a really useful tool to start, because it doesn't make assumptions about people's level of engagement with politics or any of those things, and it doesn't depend on that to kind of to get out there. So I think it's something, but I also think that the parts of the movement that aren't engaged at the minute, whatever that is, whether it's NGOs, whether it is the local user-led branches of the big six charities, but actually on the local level there are some fantastic projects and activists and workers going on. We need to engage with them. Council workers right across the country, disabled blocks of council workers within council, outside of trade unions, those kinds of avenues where disabled people are coming together and having something tangible that they can deliver to them. So I think those are the two, identifying who our partners are, where our allies are, and then engaging with them around something that really kind of tangible, that isn't just about what can we do and how can we do it, but actually here's a plan that's built on this.
From my experience, a campaign is very good to get people out. So people who aren't in a group, who don't engage normally, to hear about that there is a campaign, a protest, a demo, whatever that's happening, has been a really good way for us in DPAC to get numbers of people there, to see all these new people joining. Yeah. So in Reading we had that the council, and it's unfortunately a Labour council, wanted to cut bus passes for disabled people and their carers. So and then restrict it with the times as well. So it meant early mornings, so it was going to college, schools, hospital appointments, and late at night, socialising couldn't. And that was a really good one, and that got media coverage. But for us in DPAC, the biggest issue is, again, how do you let people know that DPAC exists and the meetings are out there? So we do need to have a media on site, but where the campaign is very good because it's visible. The local press like to report it. We came with banners and so on. So that's and the other thing that the chair of DPAC does is rather than build something from scratch, look at what's already there. So through trade unions, contact them through trade union councils. What work are you already doing? And they will come to you with lots of information, with lots of ready-made members on there, because they've done a lot of that work, and then you can build from what's already there.
Can I ask? I've got something in my head bubbling around, and I want to know what you think is a good idea or not. Basically, where I live, there's a group called Bernardo's, and some young adults are very political, and they're really good at telling you what they want from society, but they're not often given the opportunity to interact with able-bodied people. Does that make sense? So I was wondering whether we could try and facilitate to talk to, like you say, a CLP or the local city councils, because a lot of people are so far removed, if they don't interact with people with disabilities, they just don't sit there anymore. But it's how do you get, like you say, access can be a problem, can't it? How do you get that? People coming together.
Only a thought, but I just kind of believe in meetings. I think meetings do invite people to come together, and then you get the kind of the elements of human communication going.
Yeah.
But the question about organising a public meeting is, publicising it. And but for that is broadly a way of kicking things off. I mean, I know you don't get the same kind of quantity of people on the internet, but I think the internet, it's both. So get the Facebook going, and it doesn't have to plough away at it, really.
I think definitely going to somewhere that already exists, so CLP already exists, contacting them saying, we would like to come to talk to you, is a really brilliant first step. Going to trade unions and or trade union councils and asking if you can have a 15, 20 minute, half an hour slot, whatever, with Q&A is another really good thing. Councils, local councils should have working groups. So there should be like a disability access working group, or social care or something like that. And if there isn't one, demand one is set up, because that should be one where locals can come and feed into it and speak to the lead councillor, whatever. So they're 3 things that you don't have to, because until you reach those groups, no, advertising it just still doesn't get, you still won't get, you really, word of mouth at the moment is the best way with these kind of groups. Yeah.
Can I just say that CLPs will bite your hand off for speakers? They're always, like, the political education's first person in the CLP, always looking for speakers, so, you know, definitely.
Most of the trade unions have self-organised groups, so table members groups, BME groups, workers groups, LGBT plus groups, and they're there, they're out there in all of the major unions, and you know, as you say, yeah, they're very keen to get involved. Facebook is a key organising tool to DPAC. Its reach is enormous, and it's much beyond, you know, we do our big protests, our staged events, the direct action. By its nature, that only involves a small number of people, but it gets its publicity, so that's the key with that. And it's then what's behind that with the social media. We're exploring using video. We do a lot of work with video and social media in terms of increasing involvement for people who can't travel and can't get to meetings. It is a problem, it is a challenge. Just even using the bus if you're a wheelchair user can be extraordinary, you know, or the tube, it's hugely challenging. So having those diverse other ways of getting involved in using technology is the way to do it.
Befriending a local journalist is a really good one as well. If you just have one journalist on site, then they can advertise a meeting. But like I said, a demo is a really good, because they just, you know, local news, there's not much happening. But to have a photo of people protesting local council or something is really, really good. If you can get kids involved as well, something we're involved in Reading is access for play areas for disabled children. Hardly any, well, there's one tiny one, and that's going to be scrapped. So that's been really good. And again, the local press, like pictures of kids protesting with their little homemade banners and their parents, and it's been a really good campaign, and it's got a lot of coverage. So you have to be a bit savvy about these things for the start, and I think that's a good way to start building.
You find a lot of resources on the website as well, so there are things like local campaign packs. Which
website?
On the DPAC website.
Yeah.
You know, so how to write a template press release, those kinds of things. There are also some videos about how to do an accessible demo and stuff like that as well. So if people have sent around a blank page, so if people do want kind of those links or anything that are on, I'll maybe send an email around to everyone who's put their name down, and then if you can let me know, just to follow up on today's discussion, let me know if you want to link directly to those things, you can't find them, and if you want to do some of this stuff, you can start sending it out.
DPAC is national DPAC is very, very responsive, asking the question, and you'll get a reply very quickly, I found.
Something we work very hard at. And people giving their data, please write clearly, you know what it's like with email addresses and get one little character wrong and you're not going to get the message.
Or someone else will get the message.
Or someone else will get the message, yeah, very good.
That might not be a bad thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll just throw another challenge before it's out, which is James, because a lot of disability is...
We've got one more comment.
Okay, James.
Yeah, I was just thinking about every area in the country probably has a centre for inclusive living, and it's likely that you can meet or find somebody who's in contact with a lot of disabled people through that.
Yeah. Your local, what we call disabled people's organisations, DPOs. These were the organisations that developed in the 1980s out of the work of Obius and others, and Direct Action Network. And they've had pressures, a lot of them have had funding cut and closed, but there are still many around. And yeah, most big cities and key central areas should have contacts where you can get directly to people in contact with groups of disabled people.
Another comment?
Oh yeah, in terms of like involvement and demonstrations and stuff, like obviously disabilities and illnesses really hard to get to demonstrations.
Sorry, I'm really struggling to hear, sorry. Yeah.
I'm thinking about how to involve like get to do demonstrations.
Accessible demonstrations.
You mentioned a bit to do technology and meetings, but I was just thinking about maybe like online action, that's perhaps effective, like more with a petition or
It's a good idea for DPAC to develop something people can do, basically from their own sofas.
On all our big events, we have big Twitter storms going on, so there's always a big social media involvement behind the roadblock or the occupation. It helps it gets into the media, it gets the trending, it gets the message out there, and that then gets on Facebook and it spreads that way. So yeah, no, there's a lot to do. We've got about another minute left, so any other that's a great idea. Any others?
Can I try and jump in and mention that DPAC showed off their tool, which I think is still in development, but it was for a video link to enable people to come on protests, so essentially having a phone strapped so you can listen and communicate and move where the person needs to. I think it is still in development, but that was a very interesting thing from a talk a couple of days ago. So.
We've used it live once with Escalation, who's involved with us in terms of developing the tool, and we used it on an event a few months back, and we were showing it off yesterday. But yeah, that's a very exciting way of virtual involvement.
If anyone's interested, I can show you. James had his hand up.
Yeah, so I'm aware that in Bristol, where I'm from, we've got a lot of people who won't come out to anything with the word activist in because they're afraid that activism will push them beyond their limits, that they'll be noticed by the DWP and reported, and so that fear, whether it be justified or not, just the fear that has happened to other people is stopping them coming out. So I'm really interested in how do we counter that, or how do we give them the confidence, or how do we enable them to be out without contravening or giving themselves a vulnerability in that respect?
Very quickly, we must make sure Disability Labour push the NEC to implement the democracy review strategies. So we had democracy review, they've implemented some of it, they haven't implemented the disability part of it yet. And we need to push the Disability Labour to push NEC to do so.
Okay, thank you everybody. We're going to wrap up. I think we're going to come back.
Hi everyone, thank you. So I hope you had good discussions. These guys have got another session in 10 minutes, and it's the National Independent Living Strategy Support Service session straight after this, and they need to sort the room out. Can I ask you guys to give someone to feedback and give 3-minute feedback, and then we have a couple of announcements, and then we need to wrap up. Who wants to go first? Roger, and who's leading on?
Yeah. Okay, this was on the developing campaigning and building our movement. And people coming up with the ideas, getting in touch with other organisations where we know there are disabled people who are already active. So with your local Labour Party, constituency Labour Party, with your trade unions, most trade unions have several organised groups, getting in touch with them, approaching trade councils and asking if you can take and go with a speaker, because you're getting straight through the people who are already organised, and there'll be an open door for you as campaigners. Getting out on the streets, developing local protests, and then developing your local links with the press, with the media, learning the social tools by using the DPAC website, learning how to write press releases, because the press will take up on issues if they're local and they're interesting, and that's a great way to involve other people. Getting involved in campaigns, national campaigns going on. People raise the example of the Keep Guards on Trains a protest that the RMT are so involved with, and we can get that's everywhere around the country. You can approach them, you can get involved, you can do your own protests alongside. learning how to use social media, so for those people who can't get along to events, can't necessarily get along to meetings, you can be creative with the way that we engage with people, but not for Facebook events, but also using Twitter if you're doing actions as well. We're talking about some of the new tools that we've been starting to use. So these are all ways of being creative and getting people involved in as many ways as possible.
Thanks, Rog. Sounds like a fantastic discussion over there, so well done all of you. Right, on social security, who's going to feed back? Okay.
Hello, my name's David. I'm from DPAC Sheffield. Well, the first, the bedrock of the campaign should be essentially challenging this myth of the deserving versus the undeserving that has cropped up, has been reinforced over the last 10 years, because that's, a divisive mechanism. So, the system has been most discriminatory against people with mental health issues and people with impairments, but of course we have this, the social model where you have the impairment and also you have the way that society deals with that. So what we thought was we work very closely with perhaps organisations like the United Community, which are people in DPAC probably already involved with anyway. Another thing is perhaps do a commission for social security led by experts, which would be us, obviously the experts. Challenging thing, sort of policies like the universal basic income that Labour have suggested, because we think that really for anything like that to work and to not lock people into poverty, not lock people into a system, or for basic, I always say basic income, basic existence, is to essentially have a complete restructured society. That's the only way that anything like that is going to work. Linking with existing networks already fighting for rights, for food, housing, etc., which might not be focused specifically on disabled people, but where obviously disabled people have been hit hardest on those issues. Getting a disability pension as a right across the board for everyone, not just actually dependent on how you became disabled, things like that. Also, with things like Extinction Rebellion, make sure that disabled people are prominent and make allies where we can. I think what we have to do there is just not wait to be invited. And what I've found with things is just go along and not wait to, for a voice.
Well, thank you all very much for your discussion. Roger, if you want to email me all the points and we can put it up on the website. David, likewise with your things, if you can email into DPAC and we can get that in. Now, just a couple of quick announcements. The workshop straight after here is the National Independent Living Support Service. Now, as you heard in conference, that motion was passed a couple of days ago for Labour to take that idea forward, and that's something that DPAC and Reclaiming Our Futures Alliance and others have been actively involved in for a good couple of years, and Mark Harrison, who's sitting bashfully in the corner over there, has been doing some fantastic work around. If you want to stay straight after here. Now, just another one, obviously for me in Bromley, we've got a great library campaign going on over there, and the library workers have been on strike now for some 16 weeks. We've got a little bucket, I think our great fellow Trades Council Treasurer, Arthur Shaw, who's been a great support to me and DPAC and his wife Thoreen. He's got a little bucket. If you guys can put in some money, because their funds are running low. Now, they're in a dispute against Greenwich Leisure Limited, who are turning the libraries into gyms, putting staff on 0 hours contracts or putting volunteers instead of library workers. And as you know, the libraries are a vital lifeline of the community. For disabled people, a third of disabled people have no access to a computer, do not know how to use one. The libraries are going to be vital when they get when the managed migration for universal credit begins in January. Those libraries are such a vital role, because when you're losing welfare rights support as well, which a lot of the services in the community have gone, the council is sending people to the libraries for welfare rights advice and filling in forms and all the rest of it. They were told on Monday by Greenwich Leisure Limited that 50 of the library workers in Bromley are about to lose their jobs. Now, the library workers are continuing their strike action. If you go down to the conference centre, on the front, the library workers, the striking library workers are out there with the buckets. Please donate what you can, because everything you give them keeps the morale going, gives them a boost. And it's a brilliant campaign that we've been proud to support on and off for the last 3 years. And Kathy will be coming to one of our branch meetings in Bromley pretty soon. She's our Vice Chair of our Trades Council as well. So to Kathy Smith and to all the striking library workers, and if you can follow the hashtag on Twitter, it's Hands Off Bromley Libraries, and follow the Bromley and Croydon Twitter account. It's @and_unite. That is the Bromley and Croydon Unite Community Twitter account, which I'm also chair. We are tweeting stuff on behalf of the library workers because GLL monitor the striking library workers' Facebook accounts about what they're talking about and everything. So we're tweeting things out on the picket lines. Thank you all so very much for coming along today. It's been great seeing all of you. Enjoy the rest of the World Transformed if you're going to the party tonight. If you want to stay for the meeting afterwards, stay in the room, and hopefully see you all again soon. Everyone online, thanks for tuning in.